Good afternoon. Thank you for your good work in the PE 560 sports medicine class this week. And I returned back into town on Thursday morning, and I've been catching up on evaluating your forms. And I'm also working on your article critiques and your videos. So give me a few days and I'll get my feet back on the ground. But I was able to spend some time with my husband in Kauai. We celebrated his 50th birthday by hiking the Nepali coast. And if you ever need a reason to get out of town, I can't recommend it enough. We spent 4 days hiking 25 miles and it was absolutely beautiful. So thanks for hanging with me for a few days as I catch up. But I really appreciated your response this week to the reflection question that was, considering that the basic treatment for acute musculoskeletal injuries is rice, what do you believe is the basic treatment for our emotional injuries? And I wanted to provide a summary of your responses so that everybody could hear your colleagues' responses as well. So interestingly enough, forgiveness was the number one suggestion for managing emotional injuries. And Josephine, Matthew, Orlando, Aiden, Brittany, Jacob, Elizabeth, and also Natanya focused on this one. And boy, forgiveness can be really tough, can't it? Especially if we were wronged or hurt severely. I think it's harder if we know the individual, if there's a loved one. And Josephine, I really appreciated your comment that you applied to this discussion question. You said forgiveness is not for the other individual or situation that harmed you, but for yourself. If you're able to forgive, you can in turn learn from the hurt or the pain. God emphasizes forgiveness. How can you expect to be forgiven if you yourself cannot forgive? So thank you for that. I've had situations where I just could not forgive on my own. And I've had to say, God, I need you to forgive through me because physically I harbored too much anger or resentment, held a grudge. And sometimes that's what we have to do. Lord, I want to do it, but I'm just really struggling, so forgive through me. And then with time, he does soften our heart. It doesn't mean we forget, though. Big difference between forgiving and forgetting. Forgiving is releasing the other person, and by doing that, you in turn release yourself. Charles, you had a very good comment. You said, love those who have wronged you. Christ's love encompasses grace, mercy, and forgiveness. When we take on the characteristics of Christ, we're able to love our enemies, do good to those who hate us, bless those who curse us, and pray for those who mistreat us. His love is utterly powerful. It causes change in us as well in those who have wronged us. Beautifully stated, Charles. And so true. Again, it's not through our own doing or our own strength, but it's through the strength of God, and we just have to ask for that strength from him. Support group was also an important component in dealing with emotional injuries. Support group from family and friends, and this was identified by Matthew, Jacob, Kimberly, and Brian. Natanya, you also included that, and you said to forget, which it can be tough, but I understand what you're saying, to try to separate yourself, to forgive, have time, and be separated from the person. And I think that's an important part, especially if that emotional trauma continues from the same individual. Putting boundaries in place is important. Jacob focused on using the Bible to help us heal from emotional injuries. Brittany, you said to stay positive, which I so much agree. Sometimes when we're in a difficult spot, if we realize that other people go through similar situations or even worse, it doesn't take away our problem, but sometimes it helps us to be able to keep it in perspective. Prayer was an important component of our healing as identified by Melissa, Orlando, Aiden, and Elizabeth. Changing our attitude and using praise and seeking the Lord was emphasis by Melissa, and I appreciate that as well, that positive attitude. Being strong in our faith was focused upon by Brian. And then Teresa, you provide a very creative way. You used rest, ice compression, and an elevation. And rest meant time away from the situation or individual. Ice, setting aside personal time to deal with the issue. Compression related to your support system, and elevation was releasing the problems to God. So I appreciate your creativity. And then David, you finished it off with a nice acronym, GIST, And you suggested for all of us to frame our mind for the day and reflect at the end of the day using G being grateful, I being inspired, S being surprised by something in the day, and then T being touched by something. So I appreciate your guys' response, your openness. Sometimes talking about treatment of emotional injuries actually spurs up some tough memories. So I'm sorry for that. I pray that you are learning to heal through them with the strength of family and friends, and hopefully with the strength of God. So thank you again for your good work. We are nearing the end of the term, so I encourage you to keep working hard on your research paper that's due in a couple weeks, and also in some of your final assignments, the wraps that you need to show me. Also, it's really important that you take some time to evaluate the class, so make sure you look at the announcement that I posted online so that you can use the link to provide an assessment, which I find to be very helpful in making revisions in future classes. If you have any questions, feel free to pose those in online or send me an email. Okay? Have a good day. Enjoy the beautiful spring weather.